fighters at such a distance. Trembling with fear, Chunlei asked if the zombie apocalypse had really begun, and the hero replied that it would be better if it were so. Grinning, he also noted that ordinary zombies could not pose any threat to them. Crouching down next to the tracks, the guy also added that this was not at all scientific, because at such a temperature their bodies would have frozen long ago, so it was unlikely that they would have been able to just get up and go. Looking around, the uncle said that this area seemed familiar to him. Yu opened his mouth wide and exclaimed that he had been here before and that there was a subway station right under their feet. Raising his finger, the hero noted that in that case, these corpses were now running along the tunnel below, while the girl assumed that whatever was controlling them was also there. The uncle turned his head and asked what they should do now. The guy rubbed his chin, listening to the man's speech about how if someone was really capable of controlling corpses, then it was hard to even imagine the number of dead people under his control. Looking into the pit, the uncle explained that it would be very difficult to deal with such an enemy. Raising his hand, the young man suggested that the group leave them alone since there was no conflict between them, so they should not stir up a hornet's nest. Standing in front of the car, the hero also said that they would now need to stay away from this place. The girl, walking behind him, asked if they would really leave everything as it was, to which an affirmative answer followed and the uncle asked in that case what would be would be. The buildings of the Yuelu community were visible. The people bowed to the old man, greeting him. Giant Dick, holding a staff in front of him, noted that Lydian seemed to have mastered the ability to recite God well. The guy with glasses, lowering his head, praised God and their leader and also thanked them for the blessing they bestowed, since with their help they were all able to survive. The old man, looking at him, said that he had great news for the people, because they had received permission from the leader to move to another area to live with the head and the rest of the parishioners. But the young man did not believe it at first. Looking at him, the sectarian asked him not to be afraid, because there they would be able to meet all the members of their cult. The people opened their mouths wide, listening to the words of the sectarian that this place would soon turn into a utopia and they were chosen to live there. Giant Joe extended his hand to them and explained that he had told the leader about the boy's abilities and that she had decided that his ability would be more special. The boy's mouth dropped open after he said that he and his family would be treated special. Lydian fell to his knees, once again praising the God and the great leader, and also saying that he was willing to devote his entire life to serve the real God. Sectarian told him to stand up and gather everything he needed to set out. The cult village was visible. The old man motioned for the boy to follow him, because the leader wanted to see him, but he did not understand what would happen to his wife and son. Looking at him, the old man asked him not to worry, because they would be taken care of, and the woman told her husband that it was a great honor and asked him to go while they waited here. The two of them headed towards the sacred temple. Looking at the leader of the sectarians, Lydian was surprised that the leader was a woman. The old man looked at him and noted that the image of a god depended on the heart of a believer and that such things should not concern the young man, to which he replied that he understood everything. He folded his hands and greeted the leader and introduced himself, noting that it was only thanks to her grace that he was still alive. The girl, placing her hands on his shoulders, praised him and called him a good man, because he would now be promoted to a priest of the cult. The boy bowed, saying that he was ready to give his life to the sacred ascent. Turning around, the leader told him to follow him. They stood in front of a certain tree. The boy's mouth dropped open in surprise, while Kanji explained that this was a sacred tree that sent down roots for hundreds of meters and absorbed nutrients. The stone took fruit. Taking an apple, she explained that they were the basis of their diet. Handing it to the boy, the leader said that this was their hope for survival, also offering him to try it. Lydian took the apple from her hands. He then stood, raising his fist. The guy realized that his body was now full of strength, and the feeling of hunger and cold had completely disappeared. The girl, looking at him, said that his mission would be to use his abilities to grow his sacred tree, because this is the only way they could support all the parents. Looking at the leader, the recruiter drew the term and said that he would do everything he could to do this. He stood in front of the tree, holding a knife in his hand. The guy made a cut on his finger with it. Blood from it flowed onto the vines of the sacred tree. It began to glow green. Healing the guy's hand, the leader explained that from now on he needs to see the tree of his bed every day, because this is his great mission. The hero and his allies were standing in the gym, falling to the ground. Suddenly realized that people around him in the monk were able to absorb other people's powers, and that was why their enemies had gotten bad. Getting up again, he knew that this could not continue and he should become better. The young man approached him and explained that the more he used his abilities, the more experience he would gain, and noted that he should not forget about it at all. Pointing his finger at his hand, the protagist also said that his abilities were considered as a weapon, and it was necessary to improve not only physical fitness, doors began to open, its coating cracked. A crowd of living dead could be seen through a small hole. The hero was sitting next to Zinkson. He looked down and explained that given the current situation, the other bases had no intention of attacking them yet, as they were quite happy with the current state of affairs. The guy drank something from a mug, listening to his protege's speech about the leader of the Kaori base being seriously wounded and his weakening leading to the formation of new small arms groups, and also that the Yongsheng base was not giving up its positions yet. Recalling the cult, she said that they were the main victors in the battle, as the number of their followers was growing rapidly, as there were now more than 10,000 of them. The protagonist, raising his hand, noted that they were recruiting followers at an insane speed, and it was even interesting how they managed to stay afloat, as it was unlikely that every new follower could bring any benefit to the cult. Grinning, he asked if they really were the saviors they called themselves. Looking at him, the girl noted that there was another option, and the hero asked about it as well. Looking down, the hacker explained that these were troubled times, and it was at times like these that the world order changed. Frowning, she added that the young man had no ambitions, because he just wanted to live in peace, but not everyone shared that position. Recalling the map of the base, Zinkson said that the sect had quickly become one of the main forces in Tianhai, spreading their faith everywhere, and when there were even more of them, they could simply capture one of the bases. Looking at the
My first warehouse, a bank of deputy.
Our first house, my first car, better education for my grandchildren. A bit of capital between you? Capital is my life. I can save, I know my money safe.
Ở bạn con gì tiền tiền
They welcome you with warm hands.
ở bạn còn
Therapy, better parents.
Bank on better.
I thank you. Fix the landscape, but it's not like birds being saved. I know for a fact that I can't speak English.
The hero, she explained that in other words, in the future, everyone would have to join the sect to survive, but Jang told her that she was most likely exaggerating too much. Looking at the young man, the girl disagreed with him, saying that in desperate times, people use all means to survive. Crossing his arms over his chest, the protagonist replied that he understood everything, but added that times had changed. Exhaling, he explained that relying on the number of minions would not give him an advantage, especially when the enemy had modern and powerful weapons. Raising his hand, the hacker asked what would happen if they were able to awaken the abilities of all of their followers. Raising his finger, Jang replied that the awakened one was only slightly stronger than normal people, since he had encountered such people many times, and only a few were truly dangerous. The girl's eyes glowed as she said that the reason for the hero's confidence was that he had become much stronger. He hit his legs with his hands, noting that one must be extremely careful with this cult. Frowning, the guy heard someone walking outside. A crowd of the living dead could be seen in the distance. With his mouth wide open, the protagonist shouted for everyone to gather in the living room in full gear. Passing by the girl, he told her to watch carefully and report if she noticed anything. Sweat appeared on her face from not understanding where all these people came from. The hacker, with her eyes wide open, asked why there were so many of them. After all, had other bases decided to unite against them? The uncle, looking at the young man, asked if they were really being attacked. Through the telescope, he managed to see the faces of the attackers. The hero, with his eyes wide open, said that they were zombies who were currently headed to the shelter. Lion, looking through the telescope, asked if these were really corpses from the Vision base. But the protagonist noted that they were definitely not from there, since there were many of those who lived on the 4th level. The zombies were dressed in military uniforms. Looking ahead, the guy said that it was strange that the bodies did not freeze or lose moisture at such a low temperature. The girl, driving up in a wheelchair, suggested that it could be a virus, but Jang explained that he was not afraid of the corpses themselves, but rather that they could be carriers of the infection. Taking out a weapon, the hero said that they needed to get rid of them so that something worse would not happen, and Lu asked him to allow her to shoot a little. Throwing her a submachine gun, he told her not to move away from him and try not to hurt any of our people, and she answered affirmatively. Uncle made a dash, holding a shovel in his hands. The protagonist, looking at him, said that it would be easier with a pistol, but he explained that it would save the bullets better. The swordswoman also rushed forward. The engineer grinned and suggested that they compete to see who could shoot more zombies. The villager replied that he would definitely win, since he had picked up a weapon much earlier than her. The three of them shot at the rising dead. The zombie was falling backwards with a broken head. Suddenly, he stood up. The dead man rose to his feet. The swordswoman attacked him, stabbing him right in the heart. The remaining zombies, their mouths wide open, roared. They rushed to attack. The two fighters were surrounded by a crowd of the living dead. With their mouths wide open, they flew at them, while someone shouted for them to be careful. The enemies were approaching the uncle. The man chopped 3 of them with a shovel. Half of one of them fell to the ground. Suddenly, the the monster raised its head and began to crawl. With wide eyes, Chun-Li asked why the monsters did not die. The hero used the skill right in front of the crowd. Looking at this, the villager noted that thanks to his ability, they were able to cope with all the brainless zombies. Suddenly, the monsters began to drag each other away from the funnel. The protagonist, with his mouth wide open, did not understand why they all stopped, because they were all mutated corpses that did not have a drop of reason. Looking at the girl, he assumed that someone could control them, and it was this creature that took the body away from the battlefield. Putting his hand in front of him, the hero understood that this explained everything. Standing on the tank that appeared, the guy asked him to jump as high as possible in 3 seconds. He climbed inside through the hatch, realizing that he was not very good at controlling this vehicle yet, but he would have to try. Looking back, the uncle replied that he would do so. They had already taken off from the ground when the protagonist began the countdown. They hung in the air when there was no time left. An explosion from a shot thundered not far from them. The young man jumped out of the tank. Taking the flamethrower, the hero ordered them to hurry as the monsters were catching up. Fire burst out of the barrel of the weapon. The flame was directed straight at the crowd of zombies. Opening his mouth in surprise, the guy could not understand why they suddenly started running away. Opening his eyes wide, he also realized that it was already possible to say that someone was definitely controlling these zombies. Looking at the burning monsters, Yang said that they most likely realized that they were not so easy to break. The swordswoman, standing behind, noted that she could not imagine that a person could control so many dead people. Looking at the charred remains, she also said that they also could not be killed until you cut off their heads. Everyone frowned. Listening to the words of the hero that with such an ability, it was quite possible to become the most important in the city, because most of the population is dead. Looking at the head of the corpse, he added that they had to find out who was controlling them all. While tightening the remains, the guy explained that the fact that they were able to survive in this space made them even more dangerous. The head and arms were still moving a little, but the hero couldn't believe it. Taking the flamethrower out of his face, the guy said that they all needed to be burned, since fire would definitely be able to calm them down. Ivan, putting her hand on Manly's shoulder, noted that these monsters were like ghosts, and therefore they should be more careful. Crossing his arms over his chest, the guy explained that someone was controlling him. Looking at his allies, he said that the monsters knew how to avoid his attacks and even retreat, so they were definitely controlled by someone intelligent, because these were not instincts at all. The girl stared at him, listening to his words about someone trying to secretly attack the shelter. Open mouthed, Sue asked what the reason could be. Frowning, Nixon noted that they did not attack anyone, and the last time they fought only with faces. Raising her hands, the doctor said that if this force was strong enough, then wouldn't it have intervened in the war, because it was unclear why it was necessary to wait so long. Shaking his head, the hero said that there could be many reasons, so it was worth staying in the shelter for a while to avoid trouble. Looking at the hacker, he also asked her to keep an eye on their neighbors, since they needed to find out if they were attacked. The same agreed with the order. Looking at the others, the boss asked Lion and Uncle to carefully examine themselves for scratches. They, looking at him, agreed with him, listening to his speech that this was just a precaution. Extending his hand, the guy also told you about a small request. Turning her head towards him, she asked if this was related to the study of zombies. Opening his mouth, Jay explained that he needed to find out whether they were driven by a virus or a person using abilities. The hero put one hand on his hip and explained that if it was a virus, the city would soon come to an end, and eventually the whole world too. Sweat appeared on the girl's face as the guy talked about the second option with the person who controls them. Looking at her, the young man said that if this was true, then they did not know everything about the powers of Shanghai City. Leaning against him, Ju noted that no matter what the outcome, he was still scared. Hugging her, the protagonist asked her not to worry, because everything would be resolved. Looking at her, he added that his main goal was to protect the girl, because if the shelter was safe, then they all would be safe. The guy pulled out the monster's hand from space. With her mouth wide open, the doctor explained, saying that this was incredible. Standing behind her, the young man asked her to be careful, because they did not know whether this virus was contagious or how dangerous it could be. Taking a piece of flesh from his hand, she asked him not to worry, because she already understood everything. After closing the sample, the doctor explained that she needed time to conduct all the tests. Following her, the young man said that she should not worry, since there was enough time, but the most important thing was still to get to the bottom of the target. The girl agreed with him and added that in the end they would need to solve this problem. Approaching the microscope, she noted that if the virus reached other bases, then everything would become much worse. The Yongcheng base was also attacked by crowds of living dead. The leader burned them with her skill. Looking at them, she realized that there were an incredible number of them. One of the subordinates appeared behind her and called out to her. She put some kind of box in front of her. The girl scooped up liquid from the container. Then she poured it into her mouth. She used the skill again to burn the attackers. Jumping down, the leader did not understand what was happening and where they came from. Looking forward, all these corpses. The KOU base was also attacked by these monsters. The man, with his head down, also did not understand where they were all coming from, because was there really an unknown force in Tianhai, or something that they had all forgotten about? The people in the cult headquarters were peacefully eating apples from the sacred tree. Two of the sectarians were guarding the main entrance. A crowd of some people appeared in front of them, and one of the guards asked them where they were from and if they needed help. These were the same zombies which made the guards scream about monsters. There were no residents in the village, but cries of begging for help were heard. The dead were eating the residents of this village. The sect fighters stood against the crowd of monsters, and the captain shouted at them all to hold the line because the leader was protected. All the residents rushed into the church. The zombies ran right after them to the very entrance. Suddenly, fire burst out of the passage, repelling the attack. Yixian, standing in the passage, could not believe that these were the living dead. Raising his hand, the guy ordered his two fighters to stay inside and not go out under any circumstances to protect the townspeople. Running out of the church, he also ordered the rest to follow him. One of the sectarians turned into a mute. With one lunge, the man was able to kill several monsters. Everyone behind him was headless, but still standing. Having cut one of them, the fighter understood that now he would simply cut them into pieces. In front of him lay only pieces of the corpses of these monsters. Looking at them, the mutant said that this was still an abomination. In front of him was already a mountain of the dead, and he did not understand what was happening here. Yixian, approaching him, asked him to move the bodies to an abandoned building. Stretching out his hand, the guy ordered the others to check if they were injured, since most likely the monsters could be carriers of the virus, which means the wounded should be isolated and quarantined. The hero, holding the phone to his ear, listened to Vincent's words, asking if they had been attacked by these monsters too. Looking out the window, the man explained that more than 100 people had already died because of them. Frowning, the leader asked where they came from, since they had not ended up in the Resident Evil universe. Frowning, the protagonist noted that there was no clear answer yet, but the zombies were definitely behaving extremely, since they could not be killed without cutting off their heads, so most likely someone was controlling them. Tilting his head, he also explained that after the words of the base leader, he became more anxious, since the distance between them was more than 100 kilometers, but they were both attacked. Looking to the side, the young man added that if someone was controlling him, then it was definitely not alone. Closing his eyes, Vincent asked if the hero really wanted to say that a force capable of controlling corpses had appeared in the city. Yang took the phone away from his ear, listening to the leader scream that all this makes their AI invincible. There are about 10 million corpses in the city, and they will simply smear all space. The hero frowned, hearing the man's words that even if they take the guy's shelter, it is unlikely that it will be able to hold out for long. Closing his eyes, the young man explained that he cannot feel into emotions, since it is important for them to understand whether other bases have encountered this as well. The next day, the monsters came to the protagonist's shelter again. Putting on his coat, he ordered his allies to follow him. Conway's hands were covered in a blue glow. Looking at the frozen enemy, the guy said that is expected because they are definitely under someone's control and, having lost the signal, are unable to move. Uncle used a flamethrower against the monsters. Together, they burned the crowd of monsters in front of them. Their bodies burned out, lying on the ground. The doctor, looking out the window, said that she most likely understood everything, because inside the zombies there lies the virus that loves the cold, but is afraid of the heat and dies under the influence of high temperatures, which is why the corpses lose mobility. The hero and you continued to burn them. Looking at them, the young man understood that something was still wrong. His eyes wide open, his comrade asked him what happened. Holding a weapon in his hands, the guy explained that they managed to destroy more than half of yesterday's fruit, but today there were even more of them. The allies' eyes opened wide after the protagonist's words that the virus progresses very quickly and all the dead turn into zombies. Walking forward, he explained that they need to figure everything out. Putting his hands on his hips, the young man said that sooner or later zombies will fill the entire city, and it is difficult to even imagine how to live in such conditions. The girls were sitting in front of him. Xingxin was drinking something from a mug. Holding it in her hands, she noted that it was unlikely that their opponent would just decide to raise the dead and start an attack. Opening her mouth, the hacker explained that if they failed to find out the truth about their origin, then this would definitely become a big problem in the future. Bowing her head, Lu said that if it was summer now, the corpses would have rotted and turned into skeletons long ago. The hero, looking at them, said that the most terrible thing is not even their number, but the fact that they do not have their own consciousness and can be controlled. Exhaling, he also also added that they are very difficult to kill, which already significantly complicates the solution to the problem. Raising her hand, the wheelchair user asked whether they really need to find out who controls them at this point, but the protagonist replied that everything is simple, because they all go somewhere after each fight and just disappear. Sitting down on the sofa, Jang added that the creature that controls them could be among them. He tilted his head back and explained that common sense was useless here, but suddenly he heard words about someone having an idea. The guy turned his head. Jill, looking at him, said that she had been studying corpses for the last 2 days and found something similar to a virus. Remembering how she checked everything through a microscope, she explained that it was resistant to extreme cold and was able to take control of cells inside the body. Lowering her head, the doctor also said that this did not look like a normal virus at all, because in structure it is something between a virus and a cell, but it reproduced just like a virus. Grinning, the protagonist asked her to explain in simple terms. Raising her hand, the girl said that after the end of the world, everything was affected by gamma rays. So for now it was worth calling it a zombie virus, and in simple terms this thing seemed to carry the habits of some bacteria and even animals. The two girls looked at her, listening to her speech about how when zombies are together, they move quite rationally, but those in the lab seemed to have weakened instincts. Spreading her arms, she noted that what was happening was most likely based on an analog of the mother virus, which somehow remotely controls them. One of the listeners asked again about the remote control. Waving her hand, the doctor explained that this control does not go hundreds of kilometers, but many animals can transmit information to their relatives, for example, through smell, and perhaps monsters also have their own way of communication. Raising her finger, the protagonist asked about whether if you fill the body with the mother virus, they would kill them too. Cleaning his mouth, he said that it was hard to say, but it certainly could work. Opening his mouth, Jang said that he understood something. Turning his head, the young man asked the others if they noticed that different zombies had arrived to them over the past 2 days, staying in front of the body. The comment listened to his words about how they began to retreat after most of them were destroyed. The girls also heard the words about how these monsters were like little children who were teaching them about themselves. Often gone, Ryan interrupted the speaker with the words that she understood. Looking at the leader, the swordswoman suggested that when the virus takes over a new body, it needs time to learn to control it. Putting her hand to his chin, the boy reasoned about the fact that it is known that after death it is impossible to gain abilities, because they awaken only on the threshold of death or under violent influence. Looking down, the young man continued his thought by saying that if corpses were capable of such things, their attacks would still not stop. Looking at his girlfriend, the protagonist asked him to pay attention to even the smallest details. Looking out the window, the protagonist decided to deal with the zombies in the surrounding area first, as their existence was a huge risk to the survivors' safety. Frowning, the teacher noticed that there was another problem. Standing up from the couch, he asked if the invasion was supposed to start in all parts of the city at the same time, to which Jang replied that he did not know. Raising a finger, Vincent said that the mutants came from the subway. Looking up, the girl explained that the team had information that the zombies were gathering at the nearest station. With a displeased expression, Ryan listened to the girl's words about the subway spreading out in all directions of the city, so it was possible that they had signaled even like that. Shaking his head, the boy realized that the size of the mutants was depended on the distance to the subway. Pointing his finger, he ordered the hacker to continue monitoring the other bases in order to see how they were dealing with the living dead. Smiling, the boy stated that sooner or later they would find a way to solve this problem. Looking at the leader, the invalid agreed to do what he asked. Looking away, the young man said that he did not care about the fate of the other survivors, so if they wanted to survive, they should cope with the danger themselves. Failing, the protagonist suggested that the zombies would help cope with the rapidly growing sect. Looking out the window in the evening, the protagonist was surprised that the dead decided to attack so late. Moving along the corridor, he assumed that the enemies realized that they would have to defend themselves from the building during the day. He was holding onto his tent, looking at how when the hunters stopped in front of the fence, the guy realized that they really were in hiding. Holding a flamethrower in his hand, Jang reasoned that this was good and bad at the same time. Looking ahead, the boy decided to check something else. Found, the leader said that every zombie needed to be killed. Sitting on his couch, he ordered everyone to attack. Uncle Yu smiled and looked forward to their coming fight, to which someone asked him what fun it was. Looking at the man explained that this was a great opportunity to hone his skills. The Ice Moon began to cast a spell. A moment later, the monsters were covered in ice. The swordswoman attacked the undead. The protagonist moved around the battlefield on his cat. The guy shot the attackers with a rifle. The wounded creature continued to crawl even without legs. The shooter jumped off the cat. It curled up into a ball. A second later, it rolled towards the infected. Looking at the fleeing zombies, the boy noticed that they were trying to retreat. Aiming at them, Jang declared that he was not going to let them go. A huge cat stood in protagonist assumed that if this continued, then sooner or later a much larger group would come to them. Smiling, the young man decided that it was necessary to take the initiative into their own hands if they did not want to join the infected. Holding his hand on the head of the defeated enemy, the guy hoped that he could help find out what was living in the subway. Opening her mouth, Lion asked the leader if they could find a way to get rid of the dead. Turning his head, he said that they had a chance to do it, so they should try. Kicking the zombie, Jang said that it was worth striking first. Looking at the fleeing enemy, the boy hoped that he would show them something. The protagonist pressed the button on the remote control. A crowd of undead was visible on the screen. Covering his mouth with his hand, Chun-Li could not count how many zombies were there. Trembling with fear, the fat man could not believe that all those who died during the cataclysm turned into monsters and expressed concern that nothing could happen to them. Crossing her arms, Vincent reasoned that it was too early to talk about such a possibility. Looking at the comment, he assumed that if the virus was a parasite, it needed time to take over the body. Spreading his arms, the protagonist decided that it was necessary to find the source as quickly as possible, because eliminating it would save the survivors from many problems. The guy's gaze was directed at the screen. There, the young man saw a blue monster. With his mouth wide open, Jane could not understand what it was. The unknown monster looked straight into the camera. The boy bared his teeth and told everyone to look at the screen. Sweating, the protagonist said that it was the corpse king. Turning to the boss, Chun-Li asked how he could be killed if there were so many dead people there. Opening her mouth, the hacker said that the king would definitely try to escape if he suspected something, to which the young man replied that they needed to get rid of the villain once and for all. Sitting on the couch, the guy decided that they definitely had to destroy the monster's lair. Crossing her arms, the swordswoman suggested blowing up the subway to block the escape route. Looking at the men, she noticed that their main target was the king, and the rest of the infected without him did not pose much of a threat. Turning his head, Uncle Yu said that Jang should decide which plan they would use. He, raising his head, ordered everyone to prepare for tomorrow's attack. Opening his mouth, the fat man noticed that his boss was worried. Placing a hand on his friend's shoulder, Chun-Li suggested that the monsters below could be much more dangerous than the team could currently think. Turning his head, the protagonist asked his friend not to worry, because the lives of each team member were dear to him. Smiling, the fat man asked the leader to speak to him directly. Giving a thumbs up, Jane promised that he would get the group out of any trouble. Standing next to the window, Lion asked if they had anything to worry about. Closing her eyes, Nanny suggested cooking something. The fire was burning near the insane base. Sweating, Fongwin decided that they couldn't just sit and wait for death. Looking up, the fighter reported that the zombies were very vulnerable to fire, but the casualties amounted to 67 soldiers. Opening her mouth, the girl realized that she needed to change her strategy because she couldn't just defend herself. Looking down, Ting asked if his superior suggested going to the zombie lair. With her head down, she said that they were clearly being controlled by someone, so they needed to find out who was behind them. To which her assistant expressed concern that it was too dangerous, since there was no information on the number of enemies. Frowning, the guy suggested waiting and seeing how the others would deal with this problem. Instead, the shelter leader said that the attacks would not stop, since the people here were a welcome meal for the monsters. Preparing to act, the boy decided that they had no one to rely on, since everyone around them was waiting for them to die. Crossing her arms, he said that the best solution would be to send the fighters out to scout. At the sector quarters, Lickian, with his head down, reported that the death toll had exceeded 1,000 people.